On March 26, 2018, a German tourist driving along the Pacific Coast Highway in Mendocino County, California, noticed something unusual at the bottom of a 100-foot cliff. A GMC Yukon SUV had crashed onto the rocky shore below. There were no tire marks, no signs of braking, just the mangled remains of a family vehicle and the beginning of one of the most disturbing child murder cases in recent American history. Inside the vehicle were the bodies of Jennifer and Sarah Hart, a married couple from Washington State, and three of their six adopted children. The other three children were missing at the time, but later confirmed dead. What at first seemed like a tragic accident soon unraveled into something far darker. Jennifer and Sarah Hart presented themselves to the world as the perfect progressive family. In social media posts, they shared images of their six adopted African American children at protests, hugging each other, dressed in matching outfits, smiling on road trips. They were celebrated in liberal circles for their message of love, inclusion, and activism. One image in particular went viral in 2014. Devonte Hart, one of the adopted sons, crying and hugging a white police officer during a Ferguson-related protest. That photo became a symbol of healing. In hindsight, it was a mask. The Harts' story began long before their names made headlines. Jennifer and Sarah, originally from South Dakota, moved frequently in their early years together, often switching jobs and homes. They began adopting children in the mid-2000s, first taking in a set of siblings from Texas. Over time, they took in more children, eventually becoming guardians of six. Reports later revealed that even during the early years of the adoptions, red flags began to appear. In 2008, Sarah Hart was convicted of domestic assault after bruises were found on one of the children's bodies. She told authorities it was a form of discipline. The case resulted in probation and mandated counseling. Despite the incident, the couple continued to post cheerful family photos, participating in festivals, marches, and events that drew media attention. Their online persona was carefully curated. Behind closed doors, however, the reality was far from joyful. The children were often denied food as punishment. One of the girls tried to escape through a second-story window, prompting neighbors to call the police. In another instance, a child told a teacher she was scared to go home, that she was being hit, and that she wasn't allowed to eat unless she earned it. Neighbors in Woodland, Washington, where the family had recently moved, noticed the children appearing thin and anxious. One neighbor recounted how Devonte had come to their door repeatedly asking for food, saying his parents wouldn't feed him. They began documenting the interactions and eventually contacted Child Protective Services. The signs weren't new. In fact, years before the fatal crash, the Harts had already been investigated multiple times across state lines. In Minnesota, a teacher once noted how one of the children would hide food in her clothing. Another reported that the children were withdrawn and rarely made eye contact. Yet each time, the investigations closed without lasting consequences. The couple would move, rebrand their image, and continue on. There were also indications that Jennifer and Sarah exerted extreme psychological control over the children. Former neighbors described eerie group outings where the children never spoke unless spoken to, often looking to their mothers for approval before responding. They were dressed identically, kept under strict supervision, and seemed to live under a set of unspoken but rigid rules. The children's isolation extended to the digital world. While the family maintained an active presence on social media, the children themselves had no online identities. They were not allowed to use phones or computers unsupervised. Unlike many kids their age, they had no private friendships or communication outside of their household. Everything about their lives was tightly controlled. On March 23, 2018, a CPS caseworker visited the Hart residence. There was no answer, but the vehicle was seen parked outside. It would be the last known attempt to intervene before the fatal crash. 3 days later, the SUV was found at the bottom of the cliff. The investigation revealed chilling details. Jennifer Hart, who was driving, had a blood alcohol level over the legal limit. Sarah and the children had high levels of Benadryl in their systems, likely used to sedate them. There were no skid marks on the road above. Data from the vehicle's onboard computer showed that it had stopped at the edge of the cliff, paused, then accelerated, full throttle, off the edge. As rescue teams searched the coastline, they recovered the remains of 3 of the children near the crash site. Over the following weeks, the bodies of the other 3 children were discovered in the surrounding ocean. Among them was Devontae Hart, whose disappearance had sparked speculation and media attention. DNA testing confirmed his identity. Authorities concluded that Jennifer intentionally drove the SUV off the cliff in an apparent murder-suicide. The motive seemed to center around fear. Fear of being caught, fear of losing the children, fear of their image being destroyed. Emails and phone records suggested that the couple had been increasingly isolated and paranoid in the weeks leading up to the crash. Additional findings shed more light on the lead-up to the tragedy. Investigators discovered a timeline of online searches on Jennifer's phone, including queries such as "no kill shelter for dogs," "how much Benadryl to give a child," and "drowning painless." Combined with messages to friends in which Jennifer expressed feelings of being overwhelmed and hopeless, the evidence painted a picture of 2 women on the brink, emotionally, financially, and psychologically. In interviews with extended family, it became clear that Jennifer and Sarah had become estranged from most relatives. Some said they felt shut out, suspicious that something was wrong, but unable to intervene. Former co-workers described Jennifer as controlling and extremely sensitive to criticism. She often isolated herself and projected an image of perfection, both at work and in public. Court documents from Texas, where the children were initially adopted, revealed lapses in the vetting process. The biological relatives of some of the children had contested the adoption, but were reportedly never contacted for follow-up. This further fueled national discussions about the handling of transracial adoptions, especially involving children from difficult backgrounds. There were also systemic blind spots. Because the children were homeschooled, there was no regular contact with teachers or school staff who might have noticed the signs of abuse. Advocates later argued that the homeschool system lacked sufficient checks to protect vulnerable children. Public outcry over the Hart family case led to state-level investigations into CPS operations. Several lawmakers pushed for reforms that included stricter oversight of homeschooling, as the Harts had withdrawn their children from school years earlier, making monitoring by teachers or counselors impossible. Advocacy groups demanded better cross-state tracking of child abuse allegations and more rigorous post-adoption welfare checks. The media scrutiny was intense. Talk shows, news segments, and documentaries tried to dissect the tragedy, often returning to the viral photo of Devontae hugging the police officer. That image became a cruel symbol, once of hope, now of hidden horror. For many, it embodied the way appearances can deceive and how social media can be weaponized to craft lies. In 2019, a memorial was placed near the crash site along the rocky shore of the California coast. Visitors left flowers, toys, and handwritten notes for the 6 children. Some questioned whether the tribute was appropriate given the circumstances. Others felt it was necessary, a way to remember the victims not as symbols, but as real lives lost to manipulation and systemic failure. Even years after the incident, the Hart case continues to raise painful questions. How many other children live behind curated images that conceal abuse? How effective are our institutions at recognizing red flags when the surface looks perfect? And how many tragedies must occur before oversight becomes meaningful? The Hart family didn't die in an accident. They died in silence, beneath the weight of an image that hid the truth until it was far too late.